Big time banger at light heavyweight. We have Bangkok ready. The Warhorse, Khalil Rountree Jr. taking on Poland's Marcin Prachnio. I'm out for Marcin Prachnio. It's just been the shit in the UFC. 0-3, all three of his losses by first round finish. The debut against Smiling Sam. The second time out against Magomed Ankalaev. The third time's the charm was against Slow Mike Rodriguez back this summer. And it's been a weird career, I guess I should say, for Marcin Prachnio. And the really weird thing is, the UFC doesn't normally take a flyer on a fighter coming out of one championship. But this was kind of at the same time as, was Ben Askren going to come over to the UFC? Well, we ended up with Marcin Prachnio. And at the time, he was 13-2. He had, quite a few wins by first round knockout. The big win over Gilberto Galvao was the one that won him over with a lot of fans and the UFC, and that's how we ended up getting him. And a very similar stylistic matchup between Galvao and Khalil Rountree in the fact that very high stances, both southpaws, both hit really hard. Again, Khalil, much more of a tie striker at this point in his career, which was a weird career change for him. But in that fight, Prachnio gets dropped by the first punch, and he comes back and rallies and gets the win. But again, in the UFC, the fight against Sam Alvey, he gets cracked, 6 ways to Sunday.
If we ever have an award for most unintentionally hilarious knockout, that would win it.
If you watch that fight against Sam Alvey, Prachnio is rocked, and he walks all the way across the cage. Sam Alvey stands there, and from the offside...
Like he's carrying groceries, too, hands down by his sides.
Alvey just hits him with one hook. Prachnio drops like a sack of potatoes and gets knocked out. He fights Magomed Ankalaev, and the fight wasn't fair. It shouldn't have been one that happened. You know how good Ankalaev is, but they reference that Paul Craig loss. You got to get Ankalaev back on a win, so you give him Marcin Prachnio. In that one, Prachnio was a plus 415 underdog, and Ankalaev won a performance bonus. In the fight against Mike Rodriguez this summer, he was plus 195 underdog, and he got finished in the first round again. And for Marcin Prachnio, when he gets in tight with somebody, he almost kind of shells up. Sometimes he'll go and he'll get a little wild, and then he gets hit. And if he shells up, he gets hit. And the only way for him to win, and again, he's a black belt in karate, he's got to rely on his movement. He's got to rely on his kicks. And you'll hear it all the time, especially if you go back and watch his one championship fights. He's got a great high kick, whether it's from southpaw or from orthodox. He just never really sets them up, and he hasn't really had a chance to throw them. So I understand a lot of people are very down on Marcin Prachnio, and rightfully so. 3 big losses in a row, all 3 by first-round knockout. For Khalil Rountree, the guy that came in off The Ultimate Fighter, Season 23, had a loss to Corey Hendricks, had a loss to El Dierte in the finale, and then lost his first fight in the UFC to Tyson Pedro. Well, then you just kind of think, well, this guy's pretty well shot. Well, he wins 2 in a row by first round finish. He loses to Michael Olszewczuk, and that one considered a no contest, but he got beat quite badly. Olszewczuk tested positive for the performance enhancers. So then you have Khalil come out. He beats Gokhan Saki, one of kickboxing's best. He loses to Johnny Walker by first round finish, and then he goes away for a little bit. And when he comes out to fight Eric Anders,
for a while.
When he fights Eric Anders, it's like when Jorge Gurgel came out to fight KJ Noons. This is a whole different ballgame. Because all of a sudden, Khalil came out from that southpaw stance.
That high knee.
And we're going full Muay Thai Khalil, and he beats the crap out of Eric Anders. It was an absolute drubbing. I wrote down the scores in that fight, Matt. They were insane. Where did I write them? 3 30-26s in that one. He beat the brakes off of Eric Anders. And then he came out against Iwan Kutsalaba with the same game plan, and he gets starched.
So there are 2 very different versions of Khalil Rountree, and it's weird, because going into the Gokhan Saki fight, Gokhan Saki, one of the better kickboxers really ever, and the story was Khalil Rountree kept on saying, he's a better kickboxer, but I'm a better boxer. I'm a better boxer. I'm a better boxer. And it was like part of his identity, like, I'm a boxer in MMA. He goes there with starches Saki. It is kind of interesting. If you are really good at boxing, you can beat a kickboxer. You just got to close the distance. Lose to Johnny Walker terribly. And it was interesting, too, listening to him talk about his transition going to Thailand to start training, because in the Walker fight, he gets in that Thai clinch, and Walker just destroys him with the elbows on the feet. And that's when Khalil decided, okay, I got dominated in that position. I'm just going to change everything. Like, and not just I'm going to change everything from a stylistic standpoint, from a personal side of things. Like, he moved to Thailand to become a better fighter.
And that's the thing. We always used to see on Khalil Rountree's Instagram, and a little bit of inside baseball, we get asked this question a lot. How do you guys research for fights? What do you do? It's a combination of Fight Pass, YouTube, Facebook, Fight TV, get mad at each other, argue about it, but we try and find tape in all different ways. We watch a lot of interviews, you go through the topologies. You don't rely too much on the stats, but Instagram too is a good spot where you can learn now. You can get caught into a trap like Thiago Santos before he fought Glover Teixeira. You watch him do a bunch of capoeira. You watch him do a lot of grappling. Thiago Santos is a master grappler. So from that, you know, okay, well, it's a bit of a thirst trap in terms of overall skills in MMA. But you can learn, okay, so-and-so's at this camp, fully dedicated themselves there. Well, I can throw that up in a graphic. We can talk about it. For Khalil Rountree, it always used to be staple of King's MMA. You saw him at King's MMA. Now it's not so. He's over in Phuket. He's really dedicated himself to Muay Thai. And you might see the Hickman brothers feature here and there. I think it's Performance Phuket is really the gym that you see him out of now. But it's such a big change. And in that Anders fight, you saw the fruits of his labor really come into fruition.
You really did. And the thing that I really like, too, from Khalil is he just developed this speed. It wasn't like just his techniques were different. His hand speed became better. His kicks became better. And his body looked different, too. Khalil Rountree was one of the most muscle-bound fighters, really, just ever in UFC. And he's still a big guy, but you can tell that the transition to going to Thailand, I don't know if it has to do with his cardio. I just don't know if the training's different. But it seems like he's just in better MMA shape now. And I like that for his cardio, too. Marcin Prachnio, it felt like when he was coming to the UFC, he was like a knockoff Krzysztof Jotko. And at the time, he wasn't even a knockoff version of him. He had that karate style.
A Polish comparison?
No. But he has the karate style. He can set things up with his kicks. The difference was Prachnio was finishing fights before he came to the UFC, which is something Jotko was never really able to do. Jotko has that really beautiful style of striking. Just not a lot is behind his kicks. Whereas Prachnio, it felt like, wow, he's going to come over. He's got this great movement. He's got power in his hands, power in his feet. And we've seen him get knocked out 3 times in the first round. So for Khalil, listen, he dropped Tyson Pedro in the first second of their fight with the first punch he threw. He knocked out Daniel Jolly, knocks out Paul Craig. Like, Khalil Rountree is one of the more powerful guys you will see in MMA. And it's not just because he hits hard. It's the technique behind his techniques now. The Cutelaba loss, I don't think you can take much from that. Cutelaba caught a kick, takes him down, has really good ground and pound. Not something we really know Prachnio for. This is primarily going to be held on the feet. So it comes down to, do I like the striking and the durability of Prachnio, or do I like this newer version of a Khalil Rountree? And something we do have to bring up, it's unfortunate, Khalil himself doesn't have the best chin. Like, yes, Prachnio's been knocked out quite a few times as of late, but I would say it's a weakness for both guys. Not two of the more durable guys you'll ever see. This is definitely one of those, like, inside the distance bets if you are going to make one. But I like Khalil in this fight.
Khalil Rountree now, and you saw it in the fight against Cutelaba, and you talked about the kick that was caught. He threw the classic, I'm going to chop down a banana tree with this tie kick, and landed it right to Cutelaba's midsection. At the same time, Cutelaba crashed distance and went to take Rountree down. And if Rountree fights wrestlers, he's probably going to have a hard time. Again, you saw that in the Sanchez fight, but that's kind of been a bit of a token when you take on a guy like Khalil Rountree. Luckily for Khalil Rountree, they don't normally match him up against wrestlers.
The Azaitar fight was bad for him.
That was a really bad one. That's probably the worst loss out of them. And again, Walker was a highlight reel knockout. Cutelaba, well, it was more ground and pound in the elbows that he was able to land, whether it was from guard or he kind of had, top position, and it was a TKO loss in that one against Cutelaba. For Prachnio, for him to win, again, do I trust his kicks from distance? Well, I haven't really seen it. He was rocked in that Alvey fight. We laugh about it. But he walked all the way across the cage and had his hands down and get hit by a hook and get knocked out. In the fight that he had, his second time out against Ankalaev, wasn't overly competitive. And then the last time out against Mike Rodriguez this summer, again, we laughed about it in the preview, but he landed a couple of decent shots, but most of the hands that you see him throw, it's hooks from in close that really have to land with precision, and they don't. And we don't really see a lot of those kicks. So it's really tough to try and take him, too. The other thing, Khalil Rountree has that high tie guard. It's going to be hard to hit him with a kick like that. It really is.
All of Prachnio's weapons are at range. And at range, Khalil's just going to be kicking out your front leg from under you constantly. So you're not even really going to be able to push off your front leg to land anything with power. And especially if you're trying to set up kicks, it's going to be really difficult for Prachnio, especially if Khalil's dedicated to the kicking game early on in this fight. If he can keep it at range and tries to avoid some of those closer engagements. Because, listen, Marcin Prachnio is still a 205-pound man, and after he rehydrates, he's much bigger. Anyone can get knocked out, especially with two guys with suspect chins. I just really like Khalil in this. I like him defensively. I like him at range. It's hard to pick against Khalil in this fight.
Last thing we're going to talk about, the odds. Rountree opened a minus 300 favorite. He's now minus 335 for Prachnio. Open to plus 250. He's now at a plus 259 over on Tapology. 620 votes. 93% have Khalil Rountree. 87% have him to win by knockout. I will be going with Bangkok ready Khalil Rountree in this fight. Maybe Prachnio is able to kind of reverse the sands of time. I know Alessio Di Chirico, 3-fight losing streak, beat Joaquin Buckley. Anything is possible, as they say. But yeah, for me, it's Rountree in this one.
Yeah, and hopefully Kevin Garnett would also pick Roundtree like us.
Matt, really looking forward to this fight and this entire card. We have a great stacked main card with the 2 big fights at the top. Hooker taking on Michael Chandler. And our main event, the rematch between Poirier and McGregor. Just keep locked in with Fight Night Picks. And as we always say, let's get into it.